This Sunday, major climate change legislation about to move in Montpelier. It's designed to get thousands of Vermonters off oil, propane, and natural gas heat.
This does not require an individual to make any changes tomorrow, and it also supports our fossil fuel dealers being a part of the transition.
Setting up a complex new system of energy credits, backers say will reduce carbon emissions and end wild swings in your winter heating bill.
And it shows that Vermonters save between now and 2050 $6.4 billion.
If all that sounds good,
but we're really concerned that what has remained absent from those conversations is real consideration about how we're going to cover the upfront costs.
Vote no on S5. Vote no on S5, the Unaffordable Heat Act.
Are you ready for Senate Bill 5? Ahead on our Sunday program. Good Sunday morning, everyone. I'm Stuart Ledbetter. Welcome to NBC5 In Depth. Well, after testimony from 50 witnesses this winter, Senate Bill 5 cleared its first hurdle last week and could be on the floor of the Vermont Senate this coming week. S5 establishes a clean heat standard to reduce carbon emissions in coming years. Those who favor it call it the Affordable Heat Act, even though it will almost surely raise prices on fossil fuels, oil, kerosene, natural gas, propane, through a new system of credits and incentives intended to push us toward cleaner sources of heat. We begin with two state senators who are big supporters of S5, and others starting to hear from the folks back home.
There have been mixed reactions. I'd say there are people who are very enthusiastic about it because they know that we have a climate challenge and an economic challenge to address, and they're happy that we're stepping up to do that. I think there are other people who are concerned about the costs, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today because I think there have been a lot of misinformation and misconceptions circulating.
Name one.
Name one, that people can't afford to participate in the program. So I'd say, there's three challenges we're looking at right now. The first is that the current system we have is the one I would say is the one people should worry about the affordability of. And that's because we've had record high fuel prices for 2 winters running. Vermonters have, without their permission, without being asked, been billed about an extra $700 million in just 2 years to heat their homes the way they did the years before. So that's the unaffordable place for us to be. We have no control over those prices. We have no ability to manage those costs. They're unpredictable. Other than the sad news of all the forecasts I've seen predict that we'll stay at these high prices for a year or two, or perhaps even more than that.
Yeah, and I think Chair Bray has outlined exactly the response that we've heard from constituents, which is they know that we need to do something to respond to the climate crisis. They know that we have the Global Warming Solutions Act requirements in our thermal sector, but they're also concerned because they're experiencing the crunch of fossil fuel prices going up, and they're worried about seeing that go up more. And that's the whole point of the bill, is to help Vermonters get off that roller coaster of volatility that comes with staying locked into fossil fuels.
Well, you're talking about oil and propane being market priced, and there's no question there's been tremendous volatility, but I'm wondering what would happen if S5 becomes law. One, you're trying to set up a system, a complex system of credits and incentives that will over time persuade oil and propane providers to do certain things. What are they going to be on the hook for? Sure.
Well, for one thing, I think there's some misconceptions, especially at like the local fuel dealer level, about whether or not there's obligations that this bill brings to them. I would say it's very simple. Any natural gas company becomes part of the bill. So in this case, that's pretty straightforward. Vermont Gas Systems, VGS. As for fuel dealers, anyone who imports fuel into Vermont has an obligation. And that's because when we burn that fuel, there's pollution, drives greenhouse gases. The physics are very straightforward. Burn things, you send CO2 up, and you drive climate change.
Obligation to do what?
So you have an obligation to participate in helping reduce the emissions over time. And so I think the overtime thing is also important to pause and point out. This bill is slated to run through 2050. And so it's putting us on a transition from where we are now, very reliant on fossil fuels to heat our homes, to one where we have much cleaner, lower emitting fuels in the future.
Yeah. We're asking our fossil fuel dealers and the folks who are profiting off fossil fuels to be a part of the transition. What I've heard from fuel dealers is that they do want to be a part of the transition, that they want to reduce the carbon emissions that Vermonters are experiencing with the symptoms of climate change. We're experiencing climate change now. Our fuel dealers see it. They want to be a part of the transition. What this bill does is it creates a marketplace that allows our fossil fuel dealers to participate and be incentivized to transition their customers away from fossil fuels. So as Senator Bray outlined, what is important for anyone who purchases fossil fuels now to know is that this does not require an individual to make any changes tomorrow. And it also supports our fossil fuel dealers being a part of the transition, because what we heard loud and clear, as I said before, was they want to be a part of it.
So if I have an oil burner in the basement, I can keep my oil burner in the basement. Is that right?
Yes, you can.
All right. And what will the price of oil be if this bill passes? I mean, we've heard suggestions that a gallon of oil could go up 70 cents or more per gallon if this thing goes through.
Right. So thank you for that question. Two things. One is that we have the most thorough and complete study of the economic impact of this program. Came out of a professional report, and the Agency of Natural Resources was in charge of obtaining that report, and it shows that Vermonters save between now and 2050 $6.4 billion. So there is great net savings by doing this program. What we have to do is provide an affordable way to make the investments that yield those savings. So there's, I want to be very straight about it. It takes money to make money. It takes money to save money. We know that. So the question is, how do we make it as affordable as possible to make those investments? And there are a lot of tools at our disposal to do just that.
And Vermonters are concerned about their prices going up, and we have no evidence that shows that a performance standard in other places has led to major price spikes. So I look to Oregon, for example, which we had a representative from Oregon come and talk about their fuel performance program. And what they saw was the market stabilizing and prices going down for biofuels, which is a whole new market that Vermonters could be a part of. So when I hear concerns around cost, I know that they're coming from a place of good intent. And I know that we're all trying to understand the fiscal analysis of an important piece of legislation. But what concerns me is that we're not talking about the much larger cost, which is not doing anything, which is the status quo. And the status quo is costing Vermonters millions, if not billions of dollars, and will in the long run. So the one number I think Vermonters should know is that we're looking at around $7,500 per Vermont household being saved because of this bill.
Where will those savings come from in the short and mid-term? Not in 2050, but over the next few years. Where does all this savings come from?
So the bill is we're very open-minded in the bill about technology. There's many ways, and this fits in with the fact that fuel dealers have different ways of interacting with their customers. Some are already involved. As a matter of fact, many are already involved in installing something like a cold climate heat pump. Mm-hmm. So that's one option. But you can also weatherize, so you just reduce the heating load entirely. You can also get a heat pump hot water heater. You can also get a wood burning stove. So there are a variety of ways that will fit your household. You can choose the most cost-effective investments first, and you can use the most cost-effective tools for financing. For many people, there will be grants. I mean, another thing I want to mention is that part of the reason to have this program get going now, one is that climate change is already upon us. This marketplace is changing, and it's going to change with or without Vermont's permission.
I
The question
certainly
is
get
how to use it.
I get the weatherization piece of this.
Sure.
Insulating leaky
Yeah.
old houses would
Sure.
seem like, as we say, low-hanging fruit.
Right.
You're pushing a lot of thermal heating onto the electric grid.
Yes.
Can our grid handle all of that? Electrifying so much of what we now
Right.
rely on from oil and propane.
Yeah, great question. We took testimony from the ISO New England, runs the Northeastern grid. We took testimony from them. We took testimony from Velco, that runs the Vermont grid. And we took testimony from all the Vermont utilities, electric utilities. And the answer is yes, yes, yes. We're good for about a decade with the current system. And that's because we have reduced the amount of electricity we've used over the last 20 years, creating unused capacity in that system already.
Senate Bill 5 is now on the move and could land on the floor of the Senate for a debate and vote within days. Now, lawmakers are starting to hear from folks back home.
I've had over 800 emails.
Senator Russ Ingalls, a Republican from the Northeast Kingdom, showed us a handful of messages which had come in the past hour.
Vote no on S5. Vote no on S5, the Unaffordable Heat Act.
Almost every one tells him to vote no, which is what he plans to do.
They see it as another tax, an unaffordable tax, when we have 80% of the people living paycheck to paycheck. That's really where it's at.
The oil economy is entirely out of our control, and Vermonters have, I think, repeatedly shown an interest in being independent-minded. This lets us remove ourselves over time, over 30 years, from that fuel market that really delivers us no benefits in terms of what it does to our wallets, what it does to the air quality, what it does for climate change. You know, if someone's worrying about costs, I would say, just remember that last year you got hit with roughly a $350 million bill that you weren't counting on. Vermonters, again, got another one this year. We might have another one next year based on what we're seeing for pricing. Why would we want to stay in that system? You know, if someone doesn't offer an alternative right now, I would say they are condemning them to being stuck in a high-price system that is also high polluting. And frankly, given that we have a law that says we must make our best effort to stop polluting at that level, I would say, you know, you're, as a lawmaker, I think we have an absolute obligation to advance something. Is this perfect? No way. We know that no bill is perfect, but we modeled it on Efficiency Vermont. And the Efficiency Vermont performance numbers are very encouraging.
If I could just add one thing, Stuart, we're going to transition off fossil fuels either by disaster or by design. And we feel that's our obligation as a democracy to bring forward the best opportunity to design our way to transition off of fossil fuels.
Well, we'll be watching. Senator Chris Bray and Senator Becca White, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Stuart.
Ahead, different opinions on whether S5 is ready for prime time. Two very different perspectives in a moment. Now, more voices weighing in on this sweeping climate change legislation that appears about to move at the Vermont State House. The bill is S5, and for small family oil and kerosene dealers across our state, it seems an existential threat. They are now fighting back, and they think their customers should too.
What Senate Bill number 5 is a convoluted and complicated carbon tax, which will have the effect of costing taxpayers millions of dollars to design before it's even implemented. It will be nearly impossible to enforce, especially along our border communities, and it has the potential to disrupt the distribution of an essential commodity that 4 every 5 Vermonters needs to provide heat, hot water, and cooking gas for their family.
Disrupt means make more expensive?
Make more expensive and make it so that the network of small family fuel dealers that have served Vermont well for over 100 years can no longer compete with the big utilities and corporations.
Well, what will they have to do? What is it that your members fear?
So the average fuel dealer in Vermont is just 10 employees, 2,000 customers. But because of an accident of geography, we don't have a seaport. We don't have a pipeline. We don't have any refineries or large wholesale terminals. Fuel dealers go outside of the state and bring fuel in. Thus, under this law, they are what's called obligated and will have to purchase credits quarterly in order to continue to sell fuel. Now, we don't know how much those credits are cost. The best estimate that we have from the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources is that these credits will cost about 70 cents a gallon. We think that's way underpricing it. We think it's going to be much, much more. So the idea that a fuel company in Bennington is going to have to compete with the likes of some of the largest energy corporations and regulated utilities to purchase credits on a credit exchange marketplace that is yet to be created by the Public Utility Commission, and do so in a way that they can provide the best possible cost to their customers in a competitive environment, it's nonsensical. It really is. And it's not equitable either. The idea that a kerosene user in Bennington pay an extra $1 a gallon so that her small family fuel dealer will then go onto the exchange and purchase a credit sold by an electric utility so that they can install a heat pump in Burlington, it's just simply not right. It's not equitable, it's not affordable, it's not even clean.
As you know, the price of home heating oil has skyrocketed. We hit an all-time record back in November. That's costing folks real money. Why would we want to continue with that kind of a system when we might have something that is a lot more stable down the road?
Well, whether you're switching to renewable energy or you're switching for renewable electricity or you're switching to a different heat source, as we know, it's not like a light switch. If you are going to power the grid with renewable electrons, then you need to purchase those renewable electrons and you need to build renewable power producing plants. If you want to reduce the amount of fossil fuel and increase the amount of biodiesel or renewable gas or biomass or install electric heat pumps or install weatherization services, that's not going to happen overnight. So while you look at the 20-year span of what this bill would cost and what our energy costs would be, it seems like it's an attractive offer. That's how it's been sold as. But the reality is, as less people use fossil fuels, as their marketplace declines, those remaining few that use them will pay higher prices. And there are some that can't easily switch. Who will be able to afford 2 or 3 or 4 heat pumps, electric heat pumps? Because if you have a house, you need more than just one unless you live in a very small house. Well, those would be the people that already have the discretionary income in order to make a $20,000 investment in weatherization, in an electric heat, in a wood stove. The ones that can't are the ones that are going to be paying. You can't install a heat pump in a mobile home park. We have over 20,000 of them. You can install one, but you better have kerosene backup because you have water pipes running underneath because you have no foundation that could freeze up. Fuel dealers right now, the idea is proposed that this law will somehow encourage fuel dealers to sell electric heat pumps, to sell wood, to sell biodiesel. We already are. We don't need a business lesson from the legislature. We already are doing all these. Why? Because the consumers want them. But when we install a heat pump in a customer's house, the first thing we tell them is don't lose your fuel tank, don't lose your boiler, don't use your furnace. We had a very cold Friday last month. A very cold Friday, went through the weekend. The freeze-ups that occurred, if you ask any heating service company or heating fuel dealers, the calls that they got at 2 in the morning were not because they ran out of oil or they ran out of propane. It's because that heat pump was not performing and they had to come in the middle of the night, unfreeze those pipes, restart the boiler so that they were able to have heat. That's an important part that's being missing here. Will electric heat pumps slowly reduce the amount of consumption of fossil fuels used for heat? Yes, it will. Will it eliminate it? No, it will not. And because they've been oversold as this switching technology, which anyone who has a home and has the system knows is not true, the effect is you might have the competition that is providing this fuel, have them slowly lose market share, lose volume, consolidate. And without that competitive industry, without having these small family fuel dealers providing the service, it does a disservice to Vermonters.
Matt Cota, representing Vermont's local fuel dealers. On the other side, many, though not all, of Vermont's established environmental organizations. Johanna Miller is with Vermont Natural Resources Council. VNRC had hoped something like S5 passed years ago.
Individual homeowners are not obligated to do anything. No one is coming, to take away your oil boiler, your propane tank. The obligation in the Affordable Heat Act is on the fossil fuel heating companies who import fossil fuels into the state of Vermont. So Vermonters have begun to make transitions and move to more clean, affordable heat and other power and transportation sources. But this is a program designed to gradually help Vermonters in partnership with the obligated parties, the fossil fuel heating providers, to access cleaner heat to stay warm. And it's really, I think, important to underscore that, again, no one is being obligated to do anything, and except for the fossil fuel heating providers. And the goal is to provide Vermonters with more choices. And those choices start with things like weatherization, cold climate heat pumps, advanced wood heat, some biofuels for those who, who have oil boilers that can use a little bit of biofuels to cut down the carbon intensity of what they are using to stay warm. So it's designed to deliver cleaner, more cost-effective choices.
But if you stick with the equipment that you have, it will become progressively more expensive, right? It's a system that has built-in incentives that are going to raise the price of inaction.
It could, if the fossil fuel heating companies pass on that cost to their customers.
Wouldn't it be better to have a national program rather than have our tiny little state go it alone with the uncertainties that this provides for homeowners?
Absolutely, it would be better. Unfortunately, that is not happening. That is out of reach, I think, in this moment. Thankfully, Vermont's not going it alone. Many other states and jurisdictions globally and certainly nationally are taking similar approaches. On the Western Seaboard, there are performance-based standards in the transportation sector. There's cap and invest programs that have been working and are ramping out there. And our neighboring states that also have obligations to reduce pollution are also looking at similar programs. There's a conversation in Massachusetts, had outreach from someone in Maine. Other states are looking at strategies like this because we will be moving off of fossil fuels for climate reasons, for economic reasons. And the goal is to do that by thoughtful design, like the Affordable Heat Act, instead of by default and ongoing delay, which is really costly for the planet and for people's pocketbooks. I also just really want to underscore that as this conversation is happening in Vermont, it's really good timing with the confluence of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is an unprecedented opportunity that the federal government did deliver, which is going to drive millions of dollars and could be hundreds of millions of dollars that, if the Affordable Heat Act in particular moves forward, Vermont and Vermonters can leverage to really drive down the costs for Vermonters, those upfront capital costs, drive down the costs of the compliance with the program in general. We have a massive opportunity to help tens of thousands of Vermonters out of the gate, cut their costs, cut carbon, and avail ourselves of even more money through the program, the Inflation Reduction Act program.
Two different perspectives this morning. Senate insiders tell us they hope to move S5 to the floor for a debate and a vote starting Thursday. Ahead, the Scott administration weighs in. Republican Governor Phil Scott has reservations about Senate Bill 5. He vetoed last year's version because it launched a new system whose costs to homeowners, renters, and businesses were not fully known. The administration's point person will join us here next week, but Here's a preview.
We've spent a lot of time talking about the long-term benefits of the transition away from fossil fuels and the volatile prices that come with them. But we're really concerned that what has remained absent from those conversations is real consideration about how we're going to cover the upfront costs. Our best estimate is there's about $2 billion worth of needs, investment needs that will need to be made between now and 2030 in things like weatherizing homes, installing heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And it is not clear that we've fully thought through how we will pay for that transition.
Natural Resources Secretary Julie Moore. We'll continue our conversation with an update here next week. For now, I'm Stuart Ledbetter. And for all of us here at NBC5, thank you.